So what do you have in your hand there, Mark?
Ah, very nice Moro Chris, Southern Philippine blade. Again, as I mentioned before, sort of a journeyman's blade, a real sword. The likelihood that this cleaved human flesh is pretty high. Feels fantastic. The design is particularly unique because it brings these essentially these straps down and straps it onto the blade. So it just is unusual because oftentimes a Chris has a really short little tang. I like this big blade and a short tang. This one feels like it's like a solid piece of steel. It just feels fantastic. Very nice.
So you had mentioned that like most Filipino blades are by your the definition that it's not really a sword, but
not really a sword.
Knife.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that the Chris, a lot of people assume it has a
yeah. This is too small.
Right. So can you talk about the guard? I mean, why that's not really a function?
Well, it does, this is. I mean, if I've got maybe 8 sheets of paper here, so that's all the protection for my hand. It's not very useful. This is mostly useless. I mean, it might provide a little bit of protection for one knuckle, but my thumb is wide open, which is one of the primary targets, and all my knuckles on this side are open, so it's really a functionless guard. There is one theory that these designs originally came from just the artisan who made them, and you'll be able to tell from one blade to another, similar to Japanese swords. You'll be able to tell the artisan by this sort of a signature.
Technique, right.
And that's fine. The general consensus with a Chris is that if you've got 40 or 80 warriors in your tribe, the best guys were carrying these. Because you didn't want to give this blade to a guy who didn't know what he was doing.
Why is that?
Because as soon as you do a slash, it'll stick it in your arm. Okay, because it's double-edged. So as much as a double-edged sounds great, it's pretty terrifying in a combative situation.
That whole thing where everything is, this thing has a double edge.
Yeah,
kind of thing that it hurts
it can cut you too as well. Yeah, so if I reach back and do this, I could just as easily cleave my trapezius muscle.
Right.
No
so
problem.
What would be the functional movement using a Chris because it's a double-edged weapon?
Well, the curve, the sort of serpentine curve, can definitely work as sort of a serration on steroids. Okay, if I draw this weapon against you, each one of those curves is going to hit. Pum, 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 pum.
Right.
So it's going to cut deeper and deeper. As a slashing weapon, because it feels fantastic for slashing, you'll notice almost all of them will have, the point will dip a little bit. That is almost like a cant, as I mentioned before. It gives you a little bit more, if I extend the weapon, it gives you a little bit more feel for a thrust. Although you can tell the point, I mean, you can definitely thrust with this, but it wasn't designed as a thrusting weapon. It would be more slender if it was. But if Royal's willing to volunteer, I can show you how easily this can penetrate the abdomen. Okay, but because of the design, I don't have to really chop. Everybody thinks of chopping. I don't really have to. I just need to touch you with it.
Right.
Okay, so if I just put it up on you, touch, I can be cutting pieces of you off.
Right.
So it's pretty fantastic.
So now, because it's not something that you would draw all the way behind you because of the
hit. Yeah. I mean, you're more likely to think to teach yourself to raise it up and bring it down, or raise it up and bring it down.
What I'm just thinking is, could it be more close range fighting?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
As a close combat weapon, it's great. First of all, your opponent's going to be loath to grab this weapon.
Right.
Okay. Anything he grabs is a razor blade. So a single-edged blade like a barong, so sometimes called a combative meat cleaver, the back is really thick, and you can definitely grab a hold of it and strip it out of the person's hand. But that's pretty difficult in this. Grabbing any of this is going to get you cut, even though this isn't really sharp. It would open. There's nothing here. There's nothing to grab. This is a little bit long, and this is actually relatively unusual in the blades that I've found. That more often times look like a horse's hoof.
Right.
Okay, or you'll see the very fancy ones that are ivory hilted.
Right, but that's not the journeyman.
Yeah, the journeyman one is usually just pretty flat and straight. And also this, by virtue of its design, you can see that it's already canted. Straight would be here.
Right.
Okay, so this is already canted forward, so it wants to slash. It wants to cut. Very nice. And that forward cant on the blade means that when I bring it back, I tend not to hit myself with it. If this was a straight weapon, I'd already be hitting myself.
Right.
So it's really nicely designed, and it's designed. How can I put this? It was necessity was a mother of invention.
Right.
It was designed from people who used it
Right.
and came back either themselves, making it themselves, or came back to the swordsmith and said, okay, it feels this way, it feels that way, can you change this, can you change that? And I'm sure this happened untold thousands of times,
Right.
that it just kept evolving. You know, I oftentimes say that a melee weapon, not a M-A-L-A-Y weapon, but an M-E-L-L-E-E weapon, melee combat, is about this long. The reason is melee is multiple opponents all
Right.
around you. You're in a melee. The main thing you'd have to bring to melee combat, and it's not something that Westerners are used to, is a capacity for depraved ruthlessness. Because it's what you bring behind this blade that makes this blade function in a melee combat situation.
Right.
But if I come out and the first guy I see, I take his head off or I cleave half of his flesh off, and I'm on my way to the next one before they even realize it, that has an incredible shockwave effect in a combat situation. So a Chris is particularly good for that, because when you see this thing covered with blood and raised over somebody's head, everything in your psychology turns to self-preservation and run.
Right.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so one of the things we forget about, I was just teaching this yesterday in class. When we teach Filipino martial arts, we begin with symmetrical training. One stick versus one stick, two sticks versus two sticks. We don't begin with asymmetrical training, but most combat is asymmetrical. The likelihood that you had a Chris versus a Chris, small.
Right.
More likely a Chris against an unarmed person. If I'm an intelligent warrior, I want to catch you when you're unarmed.
Of course.
Okay, I don't want to say, hey, could you pick up your weapon so we can fight?
Right, exactly.
None of this fairness stuff has to go out the window. So
Right. Remember the dirty fighting.
yes, the dirty fight thing. Yes. So we have to break away from the martial arts sparring mentality, because this is not a sparring weapon. Nobody wants to spar with this. Okay.
Right.
But the Chris is, again, it is a cutting weapon par excellence. So even with a stick is fine, because I just take off the arm. You felt what that was like. It was like a saw. Tunk, 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 tunk. It just a saw. But you'll notice that I didn't actually hack.
No.
And all I need to do, because I have that cant, that forward reach, is I just need to reach out, and you can feel what the damage would have been. So from here, I can just pull this across. So you just imagine what the damage is. I've got a double-edged serrated knife. I've cut here. I now have the pressure of your arm. I've cut there.
You don't even have to
I don't.
touch your wrist.
I don't have to do anything. It's
So
such a beautiful weapon. Okay, so almost all the time when your hand would come, this is this right here. So you can imagine the damage. I did both a push and a pull slash. It's just terrifying. So this is a little bit different. I don't do this slow because this is raised blade. So from here, I can immediately cut. This can turn or take the back edge here. Cut as I press by. Again, here with this, I can protect. Cut this way. I can take the arm here, the arm here. You can just feel all of these cuts. Okay, so yeah. I don't have to, again, everybody thinks I have to chop, but you'll notice I've done essentially no chopping at all. I've just been directing my cuts. And I can cut in either direction with the blade. Okay, so yeah, Chris is an amazing weapon, but almost always people, they think sword, and I don't even think that they're thinking, to be honest with you, but they start to think, chop. And it's not, there's no reason to do that. First of all, anytime you have a steel weapon, it can be broken.
Right.
Okay, steel, if it holds an edge, that means it's brittle. So you can break it. I don't want to break my blade. So I'm going to be very, very precise. I would imagine this is a couple of years of money for a typical Filipino at the time. It wasn't like they just pulled some money out of their pocket and bought it. It was many years of money.
Hard work, right.
Hard work. So they took very good care of it. So every position I have, like I know where all your arteries are.
Right.
So that's what I'm going to be aiming at. I'm going to be very specifically aiming for your carotid, your brachial, etc. So I don't need to have a big hack though. Just whip, cut. Just here, I cut him again. Cut him again. Take his testicles off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so easy. So fantastic weapon.